Of course, human beings, especially in modern times, have a more dominating attitude and see themselves as the owners of nature and say that they can dominate it as they wish and that they have the right to dispose of it in any way they want, and they can do this by destroying trees.
What do we mean by active environmentalism? Because we seem to be passive environmentalists. We say we should avoid using plastic in our individual lives, we should avoid wasting it, but we don't see Muslims actively participating in a provocative march and defending nature, because we are more likely to see it as being against the state or rebelling against it. This is how the defenders of the Shivra look more like.
The presence of nature in human life, both psychologically and physiologically, is undeniable because nature has a profound effect on human mental and physical health. A walk in nature is not the same as a walk on a treadmill at home on a piece of equipment.
Hello everyone from Istanbul School. Dear audience, today we will talk about our relationship with nature. Our guest is Prof. Dr. Ayten. Welcome, teacher.
We are welcome. How are you?
Thank you. How are you?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We want to talk about nature today. We want to talk about our relationship with nature, the relationship between nature and religion. You also have a book on this subject. Let's introduce it to our audience right away. Nature is entrusted to us. In this book, you look at our relationship with nature from a religious perspective. We would like to have a little chat within the framework of this book. How has our relationship with nature been shaped from past to present? What kind of a need do we have for nature? Do we still have it? How did it exist in the past? How does this relationship continue? How does it continue?
Yes, the human-nature relationship is generally handled under three headings. In other words, a period in which human beings directly benefited from nature, which is more like a period in the past when human beings cultivated and lived in nature and built their homes. The second phase is more of a romantic period, the establishment of civilizations, industrialization, the Industrial Revolution, etc. A period in which human beings migrated from the countryside to the cities. And you know how it is always said that there is a village far away, and that village is our village whether we go there or not. So there is a romantic way of dealing with the issue. This happened mostly after the Industrial Revolution, and of course today especially the digitalization period that emerged at the end of the 1990s. In other words, there is a digital phase in which, to a large extent, if not completely, especially the youth is disconnected from nature. This is handled in three phases. Of course, we can see that in these three phases, human relations with nature have also changed. Of course, especially when the problems related to nature are discussed, the Industrial Revolution and its aftermath are brought to the agenda. This is the establishment of factories, the establishment of cities, and this, along with urbanization, the pollution of nature with this industrialization, in fact the pollution of the air, water and soil, and the gradual warming of this, which we call global warming, and then a situation that is also expressed as climate change, and the fact that it affects our daily lives. In our daily lives, we are experiencing major problems today, mostly related to the change of climates, floods, temperatures, etc.
It was very popular for a while, but now we are seeing some reactions about it. We are also seeing some reactions that global warming was made up for some projects, that it is a lie.
Of course, there is also a political side to this issue, which we need to emphasize more when discussing the relationship between human beings and the environment or orientations towards nature and religion, especially in America and Europe. There are political groups or activist groups that make this issue a part of their ideological claims. There is a conflict with groups that are seen as more conservative. But beyond that, I think we need to address this issue in a more scientific perspective, in a more human, more individual dimension. Of course, we know that climate change or climate cycles have happened in the past. I mean, experts explain this. Geographers or social scientists who are interested in these issues say that these cycles have been happening for 30, 40,000 years. So let's say that 30, 40,000 years ago, we can think that you could swim in the sea in January. But of course, the danger that we are talking about today is actually something like this. The acceleration of this change and cycle by human hands is actually a big problem. It is very important to realize and understand this and to seek a global solution against it.
And it is clearly seen in these results.
Of course, as you said, we can clearly see the obvious consequences of this in our own lives. I mean, maybe it is selective in perception, but I see the effects of global warming in a newspaper article almost every day. I can see that the increase in diseases, especially allergic diseases, many issues related to mental health are being discussed, and new news is constantly being put forward about these. Of course, as I said, since this issue has a political side, it has always been discussed and there has always been a discussion about it. But I think that we should address the issue more on a moral dimension, and I think that individual responsibilities for the protection of nature should be emphasized more. This is a very important issue in terms of raising awareness throughout society, because we all need to bear collective responsibility on this issue, and we need to develop solutions on an individual and social level.
When we look from the past to the present, our relationship with nature seems to have reached a very different level. In other words, our compassion for nature has decreased. We do not show care. We seem to be more relaxed. When did this rupture occur, or did it transform over time in a way that we did not notice? How do you see this?
In fact, after this industrial revolution, because, for example, Erich Fromm's famous Erich Fromm has a perspective on life, there is the orientation of having and being. In the orientation of having, human beings have the tendency to dominate the people around them, the relationships, and we can also include nature in this. There is also a perspective of dominating nature. What I mean by dominating nature is that nature is objectified and removed from its own sphere of value and existence for the comfort and peace of human beings. In other words, it is a point of view that for human beings can destroy nature in any way they want. They can use it as they wish. It is actually a perspective of consumption and destruction.
So you are not talking about being a steward of nature. You are talking about behaving as if you are the owner of nature.
Of course, I mean, in many religious traditions or Sufi traditions, it's a recognition that human beings have received nature as a trust from the Creator. This is a teaching that is found in almost many religions. But of course, human beings, especially in modern times, have a more dominating attitude and see themselves as the owners of nature and say that they can dominate it as they wish and that they have the right to dispose of it in any way they want, and they can realize this by destroying trees.
There is also a utilitarian perspective here. That is, he sees the whole of nature as something that will serve his own life, and he continues his life by using it in a way that will benefit him. However, from the trustee perspective, we also see that he must protect nature by sacrificing his own life when necessary.
Absolutely. I mean, in this book, I have discussed it under two headings. There is a dominating perspective. This is more of a perspective of devaluing nature, limiting the value and benefit of nature to the benefits it provides to humans. There is also a perspective of seeing nature as a trust. In other words, we have received a trust from our grandchildren, but we also need to think of it as a trust from the Creator, because if we realize how precious this trust is, if we can have this perspective, we can treat it more carefully, and we can make efforts to protect it for future generations. And of course, one of the important issues here, especially when it comes to religion, is to be able to establish the relationship between nature and the creator. That is, there is a creator of nature, and this creator is Allah, the Almighty Creator, who created the whole world and created nature, and at the same time imposes a responsibility on human beings to protect all this natural balance. So of course this is something that is given to human use, that is plants, animals, ecosystems, soil and water resources in nature, etc. But this does not mean that he can use it by wasting it as he wants, using it as he wants, distorting it. On the contrary, this is an approach that puts responsibility on human beings. Human beings are responsible for these things, and they should be responsible for protecting, using, and passing them on to future generations. For this, they need to be able to develop different strategies and change them. So sometimes he needs to consume less. Sometimes it needs to use technological means less. Sometimes it needs to develop new approaches and sustainable energy systems, develop new technological tools, and do it without harming the nature. And for this, they need to make a mental effort. Of course, we cannot stop development. Mankind has established civilization and will feel the need to carry it forward. However, it is a responsibility for humanity to make this progress in a way that respects the environment and is environmentally friendly. People need to make environmentally friendly innovations, and they need to continue their development in a way that does not harm the environment.
I liken this situation to being a parent, because there is a difference between having a child and being a trustee of a child. In other words, those children are entrusted to God, and we need to look at them as a trust. When some parents look at that child as if they were her owner and use all their power over them, they can actually cause the same damage. Here, I think it may be necessary to look at nature as a being entrusted to us through the eyes of a child.
You are absolutely right, because if human beings see it as their absolute owner, they can use it as they want, because there is no limit to human destructiveness. If human beings cannot restrain themselves morally, they can be very destructive, and they can use nature very badly. For this reason, this awareness of stewardship needs to be transformed into behavior, and this morality needs to be kept alive in individual life, family life, schools, society, and social areas, and efforts are already being made all over the world to this end. This must be a correct, sustainable approach that includes values such as social equality.
You also mentioned waste, sir. There seems to be a fine line between waste and stinginess. How should the balance be achieved here?
Of course, when this human-nature relationship comes to the agenda, waste is something that is inevitably talked about. Because especially when you think of food, 40% of the food produced is wasted due to reasons related to packaging. That is just yet. It is wasted before it reaches people, or we waste it at the table. We can waste things like bread or other foods and things like basic energy and water, which are widely used. Therefore, we need to bring this issue of waste to the agenda, especially when we talk about our sensitivity to nature, nature ethics, and environmental ethics. Of course, there is a close relationship between waste and stinginess, but of course human beings need to consume enough to sustain their natural life. I mean, he needs to drink water, he needs to consume food, but he needs to consume these things more than necessary.
It's more than you need.
More than you need, and it has to be done by destroying nature. So normally there is actually a sustainability of nature. I mean, nature develops itself in such a way that it can tolerate certain damages caused by human beings, but human beings do so much damage so fast and so fast and on such a large scale that nature cannot tolerate it, unfortunately sometimes, and we as humans suffer from the negative consequences of this. This should not be overlooked.
Of course, we have a humanitarian duty in this regard, but as Muslims, we also need to have a separate stance. What kind of difference should there be in Muslims' perspective on nature? In other words, perhaps we should also touch on the relationship between Allah and the universe here. How does taking care of the nature that Allah has entrusted to us relate to Islam? How should we establish a strong bond?
As I said before, many religions see nature as a trust bestowed by a creator who bestowed it as a trust. This is also the case in Islam. We understand from the Holy Quran and the Hadiths that we should deal with this issue within the framework of this sense of trust. We see that this issue is dealt with within the framework of the belief in Tawhid and within the framework of the understanding that man is a caliph, and we understand that these should be respected. Especially in Islam, we see that a relationship is established between Allah, Adam, and the world. In other words, the Creator is a powerful force that created this world and Adam, and we can see the existence of this power in nature and the world. We can see the traces and manifestations of His existence. And this unity is something that human beings, especially Muslims, should not miss. And this unity creates the consciousness that the universe created by Allah is a trust in the hands of human beings, and based on this, human beings cannot easily pollute the nature where they see the traces of Allah's existence. I mean, think about it like this, for example, where do we feel ourselves in a more spiritual atmosphere? When you think about it, we feel more spiritual in environments with more greenery, mountains, flowers, butterflies flying, birds singing, and we can see the traces of Allah's presence. As a Muslim, we need to be able to make this connection. Of course, it is not only a matter of not wasting, but in a more active context, in a way that is at peace with nature, to be a more active environmentalist. And Muslims should actually be able to produce new ideas on this issue. So not just wasting bread and water, these are absolutely important. It is very important to recycle individually in families, and to do this in families or institutions, educational institutions. But beyond that, environmentally friendly buildings, environmentally friendly mosques, of which there are examples. For example, one of them is a mosque built by Cambridge University and supported by Turkey. Maybe you will remember it. It is a green mosque. In other words, a system that is suitable for nature, suitable for the environment, suitable for the historical texture, but at the same time, a system that does not waste rainwater and utilizes energy as much as possible is established.
In fact, it is exactly what a Muslim needs.
Of course, I mean, that ethic of non-wastefulness and further develop it with innovative thinking. It needs to be developed in a way that encompasses all areas of life. This is, of course, something that can only be achieved with an active environmentalist approach.
What do we mean by active environmentalism? Because we seem to be passive environmentalists. We say we should avoid using plastic in our individual lives, we should avoid wasting it, but we don't see Muslims actively participating in a provocative march and defending nature because we are more likely to see it as being against the state or rebelling against it. This is how the defenders of the chevre look more like.
Yeah, I mean, of course, this is how it was perceived. I think the Gezi Park events also had something to do with it. In such a perception, because that Gezi Park event can be seen as a misfortune in a sense in terms of environmentalism, because the way it was organized and the subsequent, when you look at it from a process perspective, the outcome was not as desired. So people actually think twice when they are participating in these things. Can this action I am doing have a political meaning, or can it be perceived as such? so that the person doesn't want to do it. On the one hand, people support ideas or processes related to the protection of nature, but on the other hand, they don't want to be against the order, so they don't want to be understood or perceived like that, and they don't want to be in this political dilemma. This seems to be a negative thing for us. It creates such a negative perception, especially in the minds of religious individuals. This may also have an effect, but of course beyond that, it is indispensable for people to learn about environmental problems such as global warming, climate change, etc. To learn what kind of things can be done at this point, both individually in their families and institutions, and to take an active role in this process, and to think of it as a future planning and to contribute to this process. Of course, this issue can be politicized in some way. In fact, it is necessary to deal with this issue within the framework of individual morality without falling too much into this political environment. Because when you look at the past, Fatma Hanim, in the past, this issue was perceived more as an industrial problem, an urbanization problem, but especially after the 1990s, this issue has been addressed as a matter of individual morality. In other words, every person has something to do as an individual within the framework of protecting nature. From the small savings they can make at home, from utilizing plastic waste to using more energy-efficient household appliances, or if they are an architect or, I don't know, a person who produces ideas, they can contribute to this issue by bringing it to the agenda. If they are a teacher, they can talk about it in their lessons. If they are an administrator, they can contribute to this issue by putting forward opinions and ideas in this framework. Everyone can contribute at different levels and in different contexts. Of course, states and institutions also have their own responsibilities. You know that climate congresses are organized every year, and in these climate congresses, each country has certain commitments, etc., especially regarding the reduction of carbon emissions, which are the cause of global warming. There are states that are doing this, there are states that are working for this, but there are also states that are not doing this. These states also have things to do. Ultimately, when you think about it, we are human beings and we live in nature and we need this nature that surrounds us. Do you know when we understood this the most? We understood it during the Corona period when we were confined to our homes. We missed nature a lot and we realized how much we actually needed it. I mean, walking in the grass, sitting under a tree, hearing the sound of a bird, being able to follow the colors of a butterfly.
Because there is no garden in front of our house, when you go into quarantine, there is no such thing as going into a garden to get some air.
We definitely felt the lack of this very closely, because the presence of nature in the life of human beings, both psychologically and physiologically, cannot be denied. A walk in nature is not the same as a walk on a treadmill we do on a device at home. They may both be walking, but they are not the same thing. You know that a walk in nature, exposure to nature, has many psychological contributions. For example, it increases attention, reduces hyperactivity.
So now, even in experiments conducted on cows, we see that those cows that think they are walking in a green area with 3D glasses actually give more milk. In other words, we see that they perform differently when they make them feel what they need, even with a response.
So we are happier. We are happier when we are exposed to nature. We have more attention and more concentration. We are more spiritual. We are more empathetic. We are more helpful. There is a lot of research on this. People who are exposed to nature use more. mental activities more effectively, they have less depression and anxiety. So there are many mental and social benefits. It is unthinkable for humans to pollute and destroy nature, and in fact they can do a great deal individually in this process. We sometimes underestimate it, see it as very insignificant, and blame it more on institutions. I mean, governments should do it, these institutions should do it, these factories should do it. Of course, there are things they can do, but there are also responsibilities that each of us can take individually.
Yes, there are many things that each of us can do with an individual effort or with our environment and surroundings. Maybe a little more awareness is needed for this. We need to feel and understand how much we need it.
Absolutely.
I hope we don't have a disaster like Corona again. It was an example for us. It should have been a lesson, but
It definitely reminded us how much we need nature.
I hope we will not experience this again. And with its awareness, I hope we will protect nature in a more conscious way. I say taking care of it again, but as a custodian.
It's not owning, it's embracing.
Yes, it is not to own, but to take care of. Let's wish to continue to value nature with a custodian perspective. Thank you very much for your valuable comments.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Dear audience, today we talked about our relationship with nature. See you in the next episode. Goodbye.